Hey world, it's the 20th of June 2020. This is a bit of a long video, so get a cup of tea or whatever it is. This is going to take a bit. It's going to take 15-20 minutes. So we're heading into what I would call the perfect storm of astrology. There's a number of factors coming up in the next few days, all of which individually are pretty challenging. When you put them all together, yeah, there's some big stuff coming up. So let's look at this. Firstly, tonight, in about, I don't know, a few hours from now, the sun will move into Cancer. This happens at 10:44 p.m. UK time tonight. 10:44 p.m. And that is, of course, the Northern Hemisphere summer solstice. Happens around the same time every year, plus minus 6 hours, moves forward 6 hours every year, and then every 4 years it takes a step back because of a leap year. Right. It's not really a big deal because it happens at the same time every year. However, it's immediately followed by a near total eclipse of the sun tomorrow morning at 7:43 a.m. UK time. So this is 9 hours after solstice. The sun will be at 0 degrees 20 of Cancer, as will the moon, and the north node will be at 29 degrees of Gemini. Whenever there's a new or a full moon and the sun and the moon is conjunct or opposite the north node closely, there's at least a partial eclipse and often a total eclipse. This eclipse is happening at 0 degrees of Cancer. So straight away, anybody born in the last day or so of Sagittarius, Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, or the first day or so of Cancer, Capricorn, Aries or Libra, straight away you're under the influence, so to speak, and over the last couple of days now and the next couple of days is that little bit of intensity and potential stress around you. This is particularly happening in the charts of one or two most notable people, particularly the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. It was his birthday yesterday, today, something like that. I don't know, I don't follow these things, but this eclipse is happening very close indeed to his sun, and this is the reason why I think that he's not going to be Prime Minister much longer. Thing is, this isn't all. As those keen astronomers amongst you will have noticed, we're also in a period where 5 of the 8 planets that we count as planets that move forward and backwards, 5 planets are currently retrograde. And from Monday night of this week, UK time, through to Thursday morning, UK time, there'll be 6 planets retrograde. Neptune is going to go retrograde on Monday night, and Venus will start moving forward again on Thursday morning. So over the period of Monday night to Thursday morning, UK time, only Mars and Uranus will be moving forward. All the other planets, not the sun and moon, but planets in the sky, will be going retrograde. So when their planets are retrograde, when there's a lot of retrogrades, as I've said before, there's not going to be a great deal of clarity and forward thinking. Much more a time of reassessment, reevaluation, reconsideration. But you can also bet your bottom dollar that at this time there's going to be quite a lot of headless chickens out there and people who are going to be making mountains out of molehills and letting things get out of proportion. So any type of large event, for example, that's happening over the next 3 or 4 days is probably not going to work out the way that the organisers expect it to, regardless of where it is. The eclipse is going to be centred over northeastern Africa, and then especially over Saudi Arabia and then India. India COVID numbers are going up over 1,000 a day, 2,000 a day I heard recently, and certainly India is in a comparable mess to Brazil and America when it comes to the numbers of infections. And yet these are the countries that are adamant that they're going to open up the economy, even though the infected numbers of people are escalating still. This is obviously going to end in some type of pretty messy scenario, with more and more people getting sick, and yet lockdown not being observed. In the countries that have had a strict lockdown and the people have kept to it, yes, the numbers are now going down, at least temporarily. Saudi Arabia is becoming ever more of a kind of cornered state. The number of other countries that are beginning to sort of wag their fingers at it and say, no, look, you're a bit of a pariah, you've got to do something about this, about a number of things, whether it's the suppression of women, whether it's political dissent or lack of, human rights issues. Saudi's digging a hole, as is India. So this eclipse is not going to be beneficial for either of these two countries. So we've got the eclipse and the solstice within 12 hours of each other, plus we've got 5 or 6 planets retrograde. Put those 3 factors together, you've got the recipe for a pretty intense period of events and situations developing over the coming week. But this isn't all. For those of you who are serious about your astrological and to a lesser extent your astronomical studies, I urge you to look at not just the geocentric horoscope, which is where we put the Earth in the center, and whenever you do a horoscope reading for a client or a friend or a member of family, you're looking at geocentric astrology. Heliocentric astrology, when you put the sun in the middle of the horoscope and the planets, including the Earth, go around it. So obviously there's no retrogrades ever in a heliocentric chart. That gives a much better perspective on global events that are not human orientated, i.e. weather patterns, geophysical activity such as weather patterns, volcanoes, earthquakes, things like this. When you look at the heliocentric chart for July 12, July 13, you will see that Mercury and Venus and the Sun are all in a direct line with each other. On July 13 and 14, the Sun and Jupiter and the Earth are in a direct line with each other. I know from studies on earthquakes that I did many years ago that whenever the Sun and Earth and Jupiter are in a straight line, whether it's by conjunction or opposition in a heliocentric chart, there's a 75% plus chance of serious earthquake. So I am suggesting that around the 12th, 13th, 14th of July, there's likely to be major earthquake activity and volcanic activity somewhere on a planet in a way that is going to stand out. I remember at the start of this year doing on my global video that this was going to be the year that most of us would rather not deal with. This was going to be a stinker of a year. Already that has proven true. Thank you, COVID. However, I'm sorry to say this, but in my astrological opinion, we're not yet at the most difficult time of this year. COVID was not a random factor. It's been an accident waiting to happen for a long time, but it's not the worst thing that's coming up. We are heading into the perfect storm. And there are 2 separate waves to this. There is the time of now through to the middle of July. But then there is the time also, there's 2 other times. From a geocentric perspective, I am looking at the middle 10 days, particularly the 3rd week of August, when Mars in the sky will be squaring Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto. And that's going to have a human effect, as in that's likely when there's likely to be quite a lot of sudden developments, whether it be economic warfare, cyber warfare, and hopefully not military warfare, some type of aggression around the 3rd week of August. But this is then followed by the new moon on October the 16th and then the full moon on October the 31st. Now, if you look at it from a geocentric point of view, the new moon on October the 16th, the sun and moon at 21 degrees of Libra, I think, will be opposite Mars in the sky and square Saturn, Uranus and Pluto, which in itself is a bit of a stinker. And that's the last pass from a heliocentric perspective of the big squares, oppositions, conjunctions of this year, because by the time Mars is moving forward again and squares Pluto, it will be mid-December, by which time both Jupiter and Saturn will have moved into Aquarius. But for those astrologers stroke astronomers out, you look at the heliocentric chart for the 31st of October. In that chart, Mars in the sky is once again very strongly squared to Saturn, Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn. Mars will be in Aries heliocentrically, and at exactly the same time the Sun, well, geocentrically it will be exactly opposite Uranus. Heliocentrically it's exactly conjunct Uranus, and there is a full moon that day. So the 31st of October is again a time where I feel there's going to be major. Now I've got it wrong, I'm sorry, forget that last bit. Let me retract that. On the 31st of October, Mars will be at the very start of Taurus heliocentrically, exactly squared to the degree Jupiter and Saturn. And the Sun will be conjunct Uranus heliocentrically. There are further geophysical actions taking place on the 31st of October this year. So that's 2 dates. July the 12th to 14th, October the 30th to November the 1st, and I'm suggesting there's going to be some pretty big developments globally that are going to impact on everyone. Now, this is not an extinction event by a long way. It's going to take a lot to wipe out humanity. But it is pretty big. This is big. See, whenever I've seen anything like this, on the very rare occasion that I've seen anything like this before, it's a time where there's been 2 or 3 really big earthquakes within the space of a week, and or with volcanoes going off. To a certain extent, this influences my thinking when I'm projecting forward for next year. Because next year, you know, there's no big conjunctions. The Jupiter-Saturn have moved on into Aquarius. Jupiter will even touch early Pisces next year. Neptune and Pluto are getting stronger in sextile to each other as Neptune speeds up and Pluto slows down. There's no big squares between Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, or oppositions or anything like that. But next year the single biggest factor is Saturn in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus. And now, since we're only 6 months away, well, 7 months away from this becoming a reality, starting to think about this, because Uranus brings change, yet Taurus is one of the more resilient and dogmatic and perseverant of signs, not given to flexibility and adaptability. So when Uranus brings change through Taurus, it's probably going to be quite pushed and forced. Saturn brings stability, orthodoxy, structure and boundary. But in Aquarius, the sign of a future, again, it's a bit of an uncomfortable position. I know it used to rule Aquarius using old astrological parlance. And Saturn's going to be square Uranus for 9-10 months next year. Bearing in mind the global economic downturn that's already becoming more and more obvious, thank you once again, COVID, it seems to me that we are heading into a global recession, and that there is the potential for this to turn into a global depression, which will then take a few years to get out of. So I am not advising any of my clients at the moment. Many people are ignoring this, of course, because the planets impel, they don't compel. But this is not going to be a good time over the coming year, year and a half, for people to buy houses as first time buyers, unless they're doing it with cash. Because the dreaded words negative equity could very well resurface next year. Neither it is a good time to be playing the stock market. It really is not. I don't wish to be too down about all this, but I don't think I've ever seen, at least not for a long time, not since the late 80s, have I seen such a condensed and elongated period of challenging and intense astrological activity such as what we're going through now. And I think that we've spent this last 6 months gradually building up a head of steam, but it's like being in a pressure cooker, like being in an oven that's encased in 20 foot of reinforced concrete and all the gas jets are on. And when it explodes, it's going to take half a bloody kitchen or even more with it. So there's going to be some really big developments soon. And there's very little that we can do about this as individuals or even as governments. But certainly my advice to individuals is not to let the events of the next month or so faze you too much, to make sure that you just keep as positive as you can and carry on. Because I stress, this is not an extinction event, but there will be repercussions from this next month that will echo a long, long time into the future. So perhaps the single best thing we can all do over this next month is tread the middle path. This starts in the next 24 hours. The sun is at the solstice point. The sun is overhead over the Tropic of Cancer in the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, we're entering the shortest night. In the southern hemisphere, you're entering the shortest day and the longest night. After this, we gradually and slowly begin to work back towards the equinox, equal day and night all over the globe in 3 months' time. But we're at solstice, sun still in Latin, point now. So perhaps right now, it's a very good time for us to stop. Just as lockdown is ending, at least in Western Europe, in a way, and people are getting back to work relatively safely. The virus is still around, but the numbers are dropping rapidly in Western Europe because we've done the lockdown. But the tendency to go to extremes in the short-term future, to go over the top, to overreach ourselves, is going to be big. The wise person will still be taking a very cautious approach to the future. More on this in the next few days. Catch you later, world. Bye.